Hello, and welcome to Caleb's Meditations. Today I'll be talking about the idea of redemption within Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. In Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, redemption is a central idea. This idea of redemption is shown through different perceptions and perspectives of the different characters, and I'll be focusing mostly on Raskolnikov and Sonia. Both these characters experience and observe immense amounts of suffering. Not only this, but they are both guilty of a sin, a crime. On Raskolnikov's side, he murdered Alyona and Lizaveta, and on Sonia's side, she went against her principles and became a prostitute to try and save her family from a life of destitution. In both senses, they in a way gave up themselves to try and achieve a greater good. But we will be talking more about what that greater good is and how it interacts with the idea of redemption later on. Both these characters, racked by their conscience, they both seek justice and redemption, but they seek it in different ways, as they understand the idea of redemption differently from each other. Raskolnikov on one side is presented as having a nihilistic view, being irreligious, not believing in God, while Sonia is deeply religious and believes in the spiritual and the idea of a spiritual redemption. First, let's start off talking about Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov is an educated young man. He is capable, intelligent, impulsively kind, and wants to be an extraordinary person. While Raskolnikov is irreligious, he has a strong moral sense for justice. What this justice is, it's hard to understand because he bases the justice off of himself. A good explanation of this justice that Raskolnikov bases him off is he holds this theory about the extraordinary individual. The idea of the extraordinary individual is that there are some people who have a new word to speak. They have something that they can add to society, but in order to do it, they must break the current laws in order to create this new reality. And Raskolnikov believes that they should be able to step over any laws or any impediments to their progress towards this goal. It is this idea of the extraordinary character that leads to him murdering Alyona and later Lizaveta, though Lizaveta was never part of the plan. Raskolnikov had planned on killing Alyona because he had seen her as an oppressor, somebody who's getting rich off of the poor and oppressing others, while Lizaveta was harmless, but she had witnessed the murder and so, in other words, would get in the way of his plan. And so that was an unfortunate accident on both parts, though he did actively murder her. So, going to Raskolnikov. For those who don't know, the name Raskolnikov is based off the word Raskol in Russian, which means a schism or a split. And we see that in Raskolnikov's nature, because at this point, he has done what he believes is right, and yet we know, and deep inside he knows spiritually that this was not the correct action to take. That you can't simply murder others for the sake of getting gain. You can't simply step over moral law in order to achieve something. But Raskolnikov doesn't have an idea of this. He doesn't have a conception of this because to him, law is a construction of the state. It's a thing of society that keeps everyone in line, that keeps the ordinary people where they are. So this leads Raskolnikov to think about the idea of redemption, is this inner turmoil in his soul. But many times he tries to justify his actions. Many times he refers to Alyona as she was just a louse. Or he justifies the actions of Napoleon and sees himself as a type of Napoleon. But Raskolnikov is split. As he does have traces of morality and belief in him, he still has that spiritual side to him, though he doesn't want to acknowledge it. He hates to see suffering. In his dream of the mayor, when the mayor was beat to death, he was brought to tears. When he met Marmeladov, he gave everything he had to the family to help support them, seeing their destitute position. Even his murder was done in hopes to help others. Raskolnikov wants to take upon himself the ideal of a savior, but he only sees stuff in materialistic temporal terms, and therefore he can't move beyond that. He wants to be a temporal savior, but he doesn't understand the importance of the spiritual. And so therefore he doesn't understand the idea of spiritual suffering, even though he is suffering actively from it. He does not understand the need for it, and that is where Sonia comes in. Sonia acts as a foil to Raskolnikov, because in many senses they are very similar. They both stepped over some boundary, some spiritual law, in order to try and save somebody else, to act as a savior in some sense. But the difference is Sonia does not see herself as a temporal savior. Rather, she is seeking redemption through the spiritual. And in this hope to seek redemption through the spiritual, she is hoping to rid herself of this situation, to get out of this situation that she's in. While Raskolnikov does not fully understand Sonia and her point of view, as he is irreligious, but she is very religious, Raskolnikov probably unknowingly looks at her as a spiritual savior. And this is why he treats her with such contempt at times, but acknowledges his need for her at other times. Sonia, on the other hand, is much less worried about material things of this world, and instead devotes her life to God. She believes that God can and will redeem her. Unlike Raskolnikov, who only sees the outward forms of suffering in Sonia, Sonia is able to look past herself and see deep within Raskolnikov's soul. She understands him more than he understands himself. Her religious conviction allows her to understand the need for redemption. She has a solid understanding of morality because she bases her sense of morality, her sense of law, off the great lawmaker, God, and not just a state or government that creates laws. Because of this, she knows that she'll eventually be able to overcome her current struggles and find redemption through God. Now, we need to talk about the character Svidrigailov. Svidrigailov is an older man who, fallen in love with Dunya, Raskolnikov's sister, he seeks anything he can to be with her. And the thing is this man is very similar to Raskolnikov in the sense that he sees everything through the materialistic sense. He likes to relieve other people's suffering through his money, but in the same sense, he also just doesn't care about rules and laws. He will do whatever he wants. In the epilogue, after the death of Svidrigailov, who took his own life because he was not able to reconcile inside himself, he wasn't able to find a spiritual redemption because he didn't believe in it. He gives part of his money to Sonia, which allows Sonia to escape her life, which, in an interesting sense, even though Raskolnikov despises Svidrigailov, Svidrigailov becomes the very temporal savior that Raskolnikov was trying to become. Sonia escapes her misery, and she's able to support Raskolnikov in the labor camp. But Raskolnikov, on the other hand, is annoyed with her. He confesses that he realizes the necessity of it, but he's still caught in those old ways of believing. He struggles trying to see what he did was wrong, though he understands it's wrong because he feels it, but he doesn't understand it on a logical point of view. It was later that Raskolnikov was finally able to find an understanding of redemption, not being coerced into it, but by following the example of Sonia, who started to more and more see the virtue in her that he at first noticed but didn't understand, but now he begins to understand it. In the end, like I said, Raskolnikov and Sonia are very similar characters, but they differ very importantly in their outlook of the world. One, on one side, spiritual and religious, and the other side, nihilistic and materialistic. I believe that Crime and Punishment shows that the religious are able to become productive, redeemed, and happy because we see that there is a spiritual side to us as humans, and trying to deny it will only lead to that schism in us, that raskol, as the Russians would say. Acknowledging that spiritual side and trying to live along with it allows us to become greater people, and that's shown through the characters Raskolnikov's sister Dunya, his best friend Razumikhin, and so of course Sonia. While the materialistic, they just fade away and eventually destroy themselves, becoming Napoleons and Svidrigailovs. Thank you for watching my video, and I hope you enjoyed, and let me know your thoughts.